All right, so now we're going to get on to the sheetrock department. Sheetrock, drywall, gypboard, a lot of different names. Sheetrock comes in two basic lengths, 8-foot lengths, 12-foot lengths. Both of those lengths come in 4-foot widths. So a 4x8 sheet of sheetrock or a 4x12-foot sheet of sheetrock is what's available out there. It comes in several different thicknesses, 1/4 inch, 3/8, 1/2 inch, 5/8, all for different purposes, okay? You're going to need to know what to use where. Certain ceilings, party walls are going to have to be 5/8 for fire coat, okay? Other areas, 1/2 inch sheetrock is going to work just fine. So we're going to get into the sheetrock mode. Now, of all of the parts of this project that I got to tell you is one of the most physical jobs you'll ever do, hanging sheetrock, especially the ceilings, is one hell of an effort job. And it's something that, unless you're really up for some physical work, hiring people to do this is, people think, oh gosh, anybody can hang sheetrock. Not true. Not true. There's a lot of tricks to how to do it and how to do it right. And because it's so physical, you really have to think it out. Is this what I want to be doing? Using 12-foot sheets of sheetrock whenever possible is to your advantage because the less seams you can put in a sheetrock job, the better, right? We are going to have to tape all of our seams, which is a whole second step to the sheetrock process. And so the less seams, the better. I remember a job that I did when I was about 13 years old. And I was fairly handy and I knew how to use some basic tools. And a friend of the family asked me to frame a simple dividing wall in a building that they had their office in. And then once I built the wall, to sheetrock it and tape it and sand it and paint it. That all sounded simple enough. Well, I built the wall. That was no big deal. But I had never sheetrocked anything before. And so I measured the wall, and the way the measurement came out, I felt like if I used up all my scraps just right, that I could do this whole wall with 5 sheets of sheetrock. I must have had 8,000 little pieces in that simple wall, front and back, to fill it up. And I got it done with my 5 pieces. The problem is that I had seams everywhere. And it took about, 50 gallons of drywall mud and taping and sanding to finish this out so that it looked good. Spend more money on sheetrock to create less seams. That is huge. If you've gotten nothing else out of these CDs, spend more money on sheetrock, create less seams. The ceiling is fairly self-explanatory. You've got to cover the ceiling. It's going to have appropriate thickness sheetrock. And you're going to nail it to just temp it up there, and then you're going to come back and screw it off so that it's permanently secure. You always do the ceilings first, okay? Then you're going to use a factory edge, meaning an uncut edge of the sheetrock, and you're going to start by taking your wall sheet and tucking it tight to the ceiling. You always start high, okay? You get that one in first. Then the next one that you do is you put one starting from the floor going up. You lift that sheet off the floor by 1/2 inch. So put a 1/2 inch block underneath that lower sheet and set the lower sheet. Now these are 4 feet wide. Now if you have 8-foot tall walls, you're done, aren't you? Right? But if you're doing 10-foot tall walls, you're going to have a 2-foot space, but that 2-foot space needs to be in the middle of the wall. Yeah. People think, oh gosh, I've got 10 feet to cover. Why don't I put that 2 feet down low? The reason that it doesn't go low is that the guy taping it now is going to be working on his knees, sanding and taping down low on his knees. And the fact of the matter is he's not going to do nearly the kind of job on his knees that he can do standing up. And so that middle section, called a belly band, needs to be in the middle. And then the mud is feathered out across that section, mid-wall. Done right, you never see it, okay? Factory edge up high, factory edge on the floor. That leaves you 2 factory edges in the middle, then 1 cut using a factory edge and 1 cut edge for the middle belly band. That's how you sheetrock a wall. Okay? Before we start the taping process of this sheetrock, there's one more decision we have to make, and that has to do with outside corners in our structure. An outside corner of a wall, picture making a turn from a living room down a hallway, and we form an outside corner. That outside corner is either going to have a sharp 90-degree corner or what's called a soft line radius corner. Those are 2 ways that while hanging the sheetrock, I can prep the corner for taping. The 90-degree corner is created by using a metal product called corner metal that is 1.5 inches by 1.5 inches, 90-degree piece of metal with a little bead on the outside edge that is simply nailed or screwed onto the outside corner. Then when you tape that corner, use that little metal bead as kind of a gauge to run your tape knife down and feather your mud down that corner. Okay? Forms a 90-degree corner. The other, called soft line, is essentially the same idea, but it's a radius round corner versus a 90-degree corner. And there are 2 different types of soft line. One that the radius round corner actually nails on, just like the corner metal, and another that actually has paper on both sides that tapes on. There's 2 ways to look at this. One is from an aesthetic standpoint, which one do you like the looks of better? But the other is from a pure endurance standpoint. If we're going to rent this building out for 10 years, that outside corner is going to get bumped into and hit over time. My recommendation is that if you're going to keep this building for 10 years, that whether you like the looks of it or not, the radius corner is going to get less messed up over time than the corner metal. Because that whole corner formed by the round radius is actually all solid plastic. And you paint it out, but that solid plastic is not very susceptible to being banged or chipped. Whereas the metal corner with its little lip creates a fanned out, filled in with drywall mud void from the tip of the corner down each side of the corner. And what happens is if you bang that edge, it cracks the drywall mud that's thickened right next to that actual corner. And all of a sudden you've got a repair on your hands. So we've got to make a decision around types of corner. Personally, I like the looks of sharp corners better. I like the endurance of round corners better. And in that, this isn't Oz. I'm going to choose the round corners, deal with the way I think it looks, and enjoy the endurance qualities of it. Okay? In certain types of architecture, there won't be any thought given to this. In Southwest architecture, for example, everything is radius corners. Right? It's just the look. It's a much softer, casual look than the sharper, more, defined look of 90-degree corners. Then you come back to the taping. Let me say it very simply. Sub out your taping. I would rather see you hang sheetrock than try to tape sheetrock. Taping sheetrock is an art form, and it will be seen forevermore if you don't do an excellent job. You've come to all this work, hire it out. Get somebody that knows how to mix their muds correctly, how to smooth it out correctly, how to sand it correctly. Whether you choose to texture that or not is up to you. When it's all done, it's being sanded out and textured, then you want to prime the wall. Now, some people prime the wall with a PVA, it's a wall sealer, before they put on any texture. Some put on the texture and then prime the wall, including the texture. The right way to do it, because there's always a right way, it's to PVA the finished smooth wall. That's the primer. Spray on the primer. When all the taping is done, spray on the primer. Then if you want to texture it, spray on the texture. Then, after the texture, spray another coat of PVA on over the top of the texture. Now you're ready to paint the wall. So there's the procedure leading right up to painting. Now, let's talk about prepping areas in moisture zones. Okay? We could just sheetrock the whole house. And when we go into the bathrooms, we could use what they call green board, a water-resistant sheetrock that's intended to go in bathrooms. The problem here is that we've got to make a decision between really doing it right and kind of doing it right. Green board, a waterproof board in tub enclosures and in bathroom ceilings, anywhere that might have the potential of moisture, certainly meets code. But it is a long way from being the right way to do something. The right way to prep those walls and cover those walls in those spaces is with concrete board. Concrete board, comes in smaller sheets. It's very, very heavy. It is a concrete-based product, still 1/2 inch thick, just like sheetrock, or comes in 5/8 inch thick to flush up to your sheetrock. But it is board that ideally for prepping in any areas that are going to be tiled is the board to put in there because moisture has no effect on it. It's concrete. If you want to use a combination, my suggestion is this. You could go into your bathroom areas. You could put green board, moisture-proof board on the ceilings. Use concrete board on all of the walls of the tub enclosures and anywhere that remotely might be exposed to moisture. And then you can sheetrock the rest with normal sheetrock. That's kind of a combination. You see that done a lot. Me, if it's an Oz property, the entire bathroom is concrete board. And then taped, smoothed, and then here comes tile, whatever you're going to put on the walls over the top of that. Anytime I'm laying another surface on top of that surface, I'm going to use concrete board. So if I'm laying tile on top of it, any sort of laminate, any sort of glue-on product at all, the only right way to prep for another surface being added to it is with concrete board. Sheetrock just doesn't have the stamina to glue heavy tile to. I don't care if it's waterproof sheetrock or not. It's done all the time, but it has a lifespan. Okay, moisture will get behind there, and pretty soon the paper and gypsum of that sheetrock will give out, and pretty soon your tile will start coming off the wall. That doesn't happen in concrete board. You can get a permanent job done forevermore in tub enclosures, prepping bathroom floors with concrete board, any freestanding shower stalls. All of that should be prepped in concrete board. Taped similar to sheetrock and then sealed heavily after the taping, sanded, and that's what preps for tile or any additional surface to go on over the top of that. We have to now make a choice. We've PVA'd it, we've prepped, we're going to come in maybe or maybe not with texture. Now, a no texture finish on drywall is called a smooth wall finish. And I have to tell you that really excellent smooth wall finish tapers are few and far between, who really are able to produce an excellent, smooth wall. First of all, it's very difficult because the framing behind that sheetrock has to absolutely be perfect. If the framing isn't perfect, there is no possible way you're going to be able to pull off a smooth wall finish with the drywall. Because the framing being a little bit off, the drywall is sucked tight to the framing when you screw it on there. And if that framing is a little bit wavery as it goes down a hallway, you're going to see those waves. The way of hiding imperfections in drywall is to throw some texture on it. A light dash texture is just a very light coat of texture. A light dash knockdown finish is where you hit it with a light dash and then you take a trowel and you knock down the little blobs of texture to form a little flat orange peel looking surface. A heavy knockdown texture is where you really spray on thick, and then when you knock it down, it forms something that looks like, Mazatlan. You know what I mean? Real heavy Southwest knockdown. The more texture and the heavier the knockdown, the less perfect the drywall taping has to be, right? Covers all sins. I'm going to go back to smooth wall for just a minute to help you understand that, again, if you want truly a beautiful smooth wall finish, your framing has to be perfect. How do you get your framing perfect? Well, it's not a matter of do your carpenters frame it correctly. It's a matter of the truing of the walls before you sheetrock it. Truing of the walls, you see very, very few homes being built these days where somebody takes the time to do this because it's very time consuming and it's also an art form. Truing of the walls involves setting up strings down long runs of wall and taking the string and attaching it high on one wall, down diagonally to low down at the far end of the wall, and making sure that the reveal between the string and the stud is exactly the same all the way down. So you're going to set it up high, a string, and you're going to put, an 1/8 of an inch space so that the string is hanging over an 1/8 of an inch space. Then you stretch the string down to the lower corner of the wall, maybe 14, 16 feet away, and you put the same 1/8 of an inch spacer there. Then you look at the space between the string and the stud all the way along that run. If ever that string is touching the stud, you know that you've got to plane that stud down with an electric planer in that area. Okay? You want the same reveal, meaning the space between the string and the stud to be exactly the same, so that wherever you put that string on a long run of wall, the spacing between the string and the stud is exactly the same. And where it isn't, you have to plane down to finish it. Or in some parts, fill in, right? How do you fill in? Well, you add cardboard paper strips to your stud. Little 1/16 of an inch strips you add in certain sections to your stud to build the stud out. And what you're doing is you're creating a perfectly flat surface that then when you nail the sheetrock on and screw that in place, it also now is perfectly flat. You can't have a smooth wall finish without perfect framing. Just can't happen. So it's a real effort and labor of love to true walls in a home. All right, we've got some finished walls now. The sheetrock job just came out beautiful. The taping job, we've put a light, tiny dash on there. We've done a couple different coats of PVA. We've picked out all of our wall colors throughout the home, and we've painted the home. And so now we are ready to start this whole process of millwork, bringing in all of our pre-hung interior doors, setting all of the interior doors, setting all of the cabinetry throughout the house, starting to trim those doors, starting to trim all of the windows in the home, getting all of that millwork done. Now, when we actually case these doors really is a function of what kind of flooring we've got going on before. But certainly we hang the door and the pre-hung door frame at this stage, and we can get all of our cabinets in. Once that's all in and we've got our rough surface of our countertop, the sub-base of our countertops all on, now we've got to start thinking and turning our attention to flooring. Flooring definitely in the hard surface flooring areas first. In other words, we've got our bathroom floors, our kitchen floors, laundry room floor. Those surfaces need to be attended to first. And depending on what you're putting down there, depends on how you prep the surface of that subfloor. Okay? What are our choices on those surface areas? Well, if we really want to get, squeaky cheap, we can roll out some vinyl on the floor. We put it down a new cheap piece of subfloor, a little 1/2-inch plywood floor over the top of our existing subfloor, and roll out some vinyl. That's one way we can do those floors. If we want to spend a little bit more money and really do it right, we will install concrete board down on the floor of our kitchen, our bathroom, and our laundry room. And then on top of the concrete board, here comes our tile, right? Some nice stone-looking tile in those areas. That goes down next. Then once those hard surfaces are down, okay, we can start bringing in and putting in our countertops, getting all of that done in the kitchen, the bathrooms, maybe there's some counter in the laundry room, and our tub enclosures. All of that tile work and all that hard surface work needs to be done at this point. Once we've got our floor down, all of our hard surface down, we can start trimming our plumbing and electric throughout the house, okay? So trimming, that simply means we're going to pick out our final fixture, our kitchen sink, go into our bathroom, set our bathroom sink, set our shower fixtures, set our toilet. Now, let me say something about plumbing fixtures. There is no topic in construction that there is a greater span between cheap and high quality expensive than in the world of plumbing fixtures and appliances. Unbelievable. I can spend $30 for a toilet, and I can spend $3,500 for a toilet. I can spend $100 for a faucet for my bathroom, and I can spend $1,500 for a faucet for my bathroom. The range is just unbelievable. But here's the part that you may disagree with. I think the range represents a fair range because of the quality that you're getting in the range. The low end of a plumbing fixture is plastic and is going to wear out so fast and break, and you just get what you pay for. If you put in a really, really high-end Kohler or Moen or Price Fist or one of the high-end plumbing fixtures, that thing might be there for 100 years. I mean, they're heavy, heavy, brass, well-built plumbing fixtures versus some real production crap. I'm not going to tell you which one to use along the scale. I simply want you to know there's a huge, huge scale in this world. The same with appliances. I can spend $1,000 and outfit an entire kitchen. A range, a dishwasher, a refrigerator. I can do the whole thing for $1,000. I can also spend $100,000 on a kitchen just on appliances. Warming ovens, warming drawers, microwaves, gas ranges, copper hood fans. I mean, you can just go crazy. And I've done both. Spent $1,000 and spent $100,000. You've just got to know when and where. Back to our 6-unit condominium, right? We're going to want a real great looking appliance at a great price. We're going to want quality looking plumbing fixtures, but at a reasonable price. They're not going to be high end, but we don't want to venture into the crap zone. And we want them to look nice. Okay? So you're just going to have to see all of your choices along the way, but don't go for the cheapest thing because it's just garbage. You'll be replacing it in a matter of weeks. Get a nice Moen or a nice Kohler fixture that's the low end of a good quality line so you've got good support behind you, but that represents something good and solid with some reasonable quality and looks nice. The same with your sinks. Don't get the cheap little painted metal sink. It's just garbage. The first time somebody drops their toothbrush in it, it chips. A heavy porcelain or a heavy cast iron sink that has an enamel bake, a nice Kohler sink, we can spend the money on a little bit more quality to save ourselves time and effort in the future. Let's talk about tub enclosures for a second. Again, our strategy with the sixplex is keeping this building over time before we then go into a condominium sale. And we're going to do the prep work of this tub enclosure the right way no matter what we do. But I would at least like you to consider putting a tub enclosure in that is a 3-piece solid body unit. Something like a 3-piece manufactured marble unit or a 3-piece unit made out of a poured composite product. The reason that I like this for rental properties is that it has 2 seams, one in each corner of the tub enclosure, and then, of course, caulking around the tub. Anytime I give the tenant responsibility of keeping a lot of grout work clean, it never works out. So a shower that's tiled in 4x4 tiles with white grout, that's just a disaster waiting to happen. If you want to go the tile route in those showers, use a darker colored tile, like a slate stone color, and use a dark colored grout, right? Big tiles, 12 by 12 tiles, less seams, and dark colored grout, because they're not going to keep it as clean as you and I keep our home. They're just not. And so anticipate those things and try to create situations where you've got less maintenance cleaning problems on your hands, okay? Those little small 4x4 tiles in a rental unit is just suicide. And how do I know? Oh, I've ripped out so many of those tub enclosures you can't even believe. Okay, so we're working through our millwork. We're working through our countertops. Countertops, again, what are we going to do? Kind of like tub enclosures. There's some really pretty attractive looking laminate products out there for kitchen counters, bath counters. That may be my strategy at this point, knowing that in 10 years, when I put these on the condo market, I simply pull the sinks and then lay tile right over the top of that, and then reset some sinks, and I've upgraded quickly. But in a 10-year interim, I may decide to use a darker colored laminate with no pattern to it. Never laminate or vinyl or anything with a grid pattern. It just accentuates the mistake of the installer. In other words, if you walk in a room and here's vinyl on the floor, and that vinyl has nice 12 by 12 lines and squares on it, and if it's not installed perfectly at 90 degrees to an outside wall or a cabinet, you notice it. Just looks silly. Get vinyl products, get laminate products that have no pattern built into them. Not necessarily solid color, but things like a granite pattern that doesn't have any lines or reference points to it, that if you put the sheet on slightly skewed, nobody's going to know. There's not a pattern to reference, okay? All right, so we get our countertops, we get our plumbing trim, we get our flooring down, we start trimming out all our hard surfaces, then we come back. Now we can start casing windows and doors and base molding. I like to do the floor base molding before the carpet is installed. I block it up a half an inch so that they can tack strip and then tuck their carpet underneath it. The risk there is, of course, the carpet layers are going to beat up your base molding. I anticipate that and just know that I'm going to have to come back and touch up some of the paint or the finish on my base molding. Coming back later and doing it, the problem is that I don't have a solid surface to work from. If I have carpet down first, I'm taking the base and kind of squishing it down in the carpet, and I'm going to get casing that's higher on the right, lower on the left. It's a judgment call how hard I'm pushing it down into the carpet and pad. When I can do it before the carpet goes in, I simply set half-inch blocks along the wall, set my base casing down to that block, and attach it to the wall. And that way I know it's perfectly level across the wall. My floor is level, therefore my base molding is level. Okay? Then I come and tuck the carpet in carpeted areas underneath that casing, touch some of that base up, and we're good to go. When we initially draw a set of plans for this house, I want to underscore that we sure as hell better spend some time designing a kitchen and a bathroom that makes sense. What do I mean by makes sense? Guys, here it is. Makes sense to a woman. They are the ones that decide to rent a unit. They are the ones that buy this condominium when we eventually sell it. And if this kitchen and bathroom doesn't make sense from a woman's perspective, it doesn't make sense. Therefore, consulting a woman designer as a part of your architect design team in the world of kitchen and bathrooms makes a hell of a lot of sense, okay? I've walked into many, many kitchens, and I can absolutely see them a mile away where a guy thought this one out, right? Because guys, as long as the refrigerator is within, 8 feet of the lazy boy, it all works. What's the problem, right? Women, they look at things differently. So we need to understand, men, Mars, women, Venus, this was your clue, right? Let's talk about a few things that I think need to be incorporated. One, we're going to all spend a lot of time at the kitchen sink. And if at all possible, that kitchen sink needs to have an outlook onto something, right? Either facing where an audience may be around that kitchen, because where do people gather? A kitchen. Or, if nothing else, put a window in front of it and allow yourself the ability to look outside while you're at that kitchen sink. Dishwashers. Most people are right-handed. Therefore, taking something out of the kitchen and putting it in the dishwasher, it's really more convenient if the dishwasher's on the right side of the sink. Appropriate spaces, widths of kitchens, so that you can actually open the dishwasher and still walk through the kitchen, right? In other words, these kitchens that are 5 feet wide, where your ass is on the burner on the stove and you're facing the sink at the same time, those are real difficult. Give it some room if at all possible, all right? Outlets, and outlets placed well throughout the kitchen. Where are the spaces on the counter that you're going to want to put a toaster? Where are you going to want to put a blender? And think out those spaces so that you've got outlets ready. Sometimes, if you really want to impress someone, you'll actually create a situation where the outlet is behind the drawer bank of cabinetry. So you actually have a hole to feed a cord through the countertop, down, and plug it in behind the drawer banks under the countertop surface. Keeps all those cords and crap out of the way, right? Similar to a desk. Think of a desk in a den. You don't want all your cords laying, so what do? You run them through the desk and plug them in underneath the desk so that your workspace is clear. Same idea in the kitchen. All right? Lighting in the kitchen, we've talked about. There's no area more important than the kitchen to have really great lighting going on. There's some kitchens where you see that in the middle, over an island in the kitchen, there's a place on the ceiling where you can hang pots and pans from, this beautiful rack. Somebody had better thought out to put backing up there in the rafters in that ceiling area so that when you actually attach that rack that's got 700 pounds of cast iron pots and pans hanging from it, that thing better not just be bolted into the sheetrock. You see what I mean? Anticipation. You see how it all kind of comes in? What are we going to put where, when, and why? Kitchens need to have garbage disposals in them. But garbage disposals only work well and consistently if we've got good-sized drain pipes. So often, just cracks me up, I see a real high-end, beautiful kitchen plumbed with an 1.5-inch drain pipe in the wall, right? That picks up the whole kitchen sink, and of course, the garbage disposal feeds into that as well. And I think, you've got to be kidding me. The first time you put one little thing down the garbage disposal, it's going to get plugged up in this little drain pipe. So there are certain kitchens that you would want to put a 3-inch drain pipe right there in the wall of the kitchen, and then come out of your sink with 2-inch, and out of your garbage disposal with 2-inch, tying it all into a 3-inch stack in the wall. This is all pre-planning type stuff so that we're not going to get plugged up and messed up, right? So think out, what are you going to put in here, and how do you have to prepare things to accommodate what you're doing? Another thing that's really big for women is that kitchens have pantries. They have a space that is a walk-in space, again, if at all possible. Doesn't need to be big, but a space that can walk in and have a separate pantry for all of the canned goods, pots, pans, boxes, cereal, all the stuff that we put in pantries, right? Getting it out of the kitchen. Again, I reference my own home in a lot of things that it was not only important to have a pantry, there was a separate room off the kitchen that is a butler's pantry with another sink, 2 more dishwashers, so that as caterers and things are working around the home, they don't even have to be in the kitchen. They've got their own kitchen off the kitchen. You see? So what does your life look like? Think about your market. how do you give them some things here that really make a value statement? One other thing, we need to realize that this 1,000 square foot unit that we're building in this particular sixplex, likely it's not going to have a formal dining room. It'd be nice if we could put in a separate dining space, but let's think about a space in our kitchen that at least has a 2-seat little eating bar that allows people to kind of be in and around the kitchen, a couple little high, swivel chairs that allows someone to have their breakfast or morning cup of coffee sitting right there in the kitchen. Kitchen's where all the action is, right? So where are we going to eat? How are we going to service our actual meals in and around this kitchen? I would suggest that every one of you, when you're planning out your first building, take a few bucks and a few hours to sit with a kitchen designer and ask the question, what's possible? Kitchens are amazing. They are evolving every day with what can be done. The options at your disposal in terms of cabinetry. I remember when a lazy Susan in a corner cabinet was like a novel thought. Wow. Now you can't even believe what cabinetry can do, and the flexibilities of how to make a relatively small space very efficient and useful. So spend some time with the designer on that, and let's put some money into kitchens, because that money is going to be money well spent. I mentioned that when we have our HVAC guy there, that we're going to want to provide some ducting for the hood fan in our kitchen that provides for some ventilation over our range. We're either going to have a gas range or an electric range, and certainly we're going to want to have a fan above that. Now let's talk about fans. Cheap says we provide a ductless hood fan, which really does very little. It draws some air up. It does concentrate the flow upward. It has a filter system, but there's no ductwork to carry it away anyway. It just sort of absorbs it in like this big diaper that you install up there in the ductwork. You can see I'm a big fan of the ductless hood fan, right? The second would be a hood fan that actually has a duct system. A lot better. It actually takes that, steam, smoke, whatever, and actually gets it out of the work area. As we go up the food chain of quality here, we find that we get nice hood fan units with bigger, more efficient fan motors in them to really pull the air off of that surface area and get it up and out of there. But a big deal is that fan is quiet, because there's nothing worse than turning on the fan and all of a sudden your conversation in the kitchen just goes away. Here's a little trick that I've learned that is fairly easy to install, and given the layout and the floor plan that you have to work with, it might be something that'll help you. You can actually buy a hood fan unit where the motor of the fan is a separate sectional attachment. And what you can do is attach rigid ducting to your hood fan with no motor and run it up and out of your kitchen, maybe up into an attic space, maybe 6, 8, 10 feet above the actual unit itself. And then way up in the duct space, install the motor section with the fan 6, 8, 10 feet away from the actual hood fan and range area of your kitchen. So that when you flip a switch on now to turn on the fan turns on, but the motor's 10 feet away up in an attic or a crawl space area. And therefore you don't hear it. It just does its job, sucks everything away, but you don't hear the motor because it's a long way away and it's insulated in a private area, be it an attic or a crawl space or maybe running it through a closet, something away from that work area. That has worked well in the past, okay? To sum up the ideas around kitchens, kitchens are such a big deal to our main client, our main tenant client, our main buying client, that this is really worth doing a lot of planning in this area. It is the room in the house that that is going to sell this product, be it as a rental or be it as a condominium. And therefore, in the pre-construction drawings and plan, I would really like you to spend some time with someone who is really knowledgeable in kitchens to look at your plan, to look at it and say, you know what? We could do this very simply. We could do that very simply. This small change would make a big difference. That pre-planning around kitchens is really critical. It's the one little tiny thing that when the right audience sees it, makes up their mind immediately, I've just got to have it. That simple. Okay? So let's look at that. And in the same vein, it's the room that we spend most time in, and therefore let's really notice about color and the choices of cabinetry and flooring and lighting. All of those choices that we're going to have to make are really critical in this space. So let's not overlook that. All right? I want you to look at the neighborhood as a whole and make sure that we're designing something that is consistent with the demographic and what's happening in that neighborhood. The one-off might be great in writing a song, but it's not great in the world of construction. It's why when you're out there looking at cars on the road, it's why every car manufacturer has a car that looks so similar to another manufacturer's car. Being a little bit original is great. Being a lot original falls into the category of weird. You don't want to be weird. So we've really got to kind of survey says that this is what people want. This is what people like. Remember, we're not building Oz here. We are building for a market. And so we need to take the temperature of our market and work backwards from what people are wanting. One little thing in this design that I'd hope we had put into this home, even if it's a small space or a small little area, but mudrooms are really a big seller. Coming into an entryway and immediately being on carpet is just stupidity, right? Give people an opportunity to at least take off their shoes. On the entryway side, a little bit of hard surface, a little tile, a little hardwood, something in that initial 5-6 feet that allows people to get their shoes off and not mess up your carpet. But a mudroom kind of coming in a back door or coming in through the garage and having a little space in between the garage and the living area where people truly can strip down and drop their stuff, it will preserve the rest of that unit over time. Giving a little bit of space for something like that, storage, mudroom, you might even incorporate it with the washer and dryer, a laundry tray, right? That little room having a separate flow through before you come into the home will preserve the finer features of that home. This home is just about done now. We've talked about our plumbing trim. We then bring in all of our electric trim. Now we've got to pick out lock sets and deadbolts, and we start really tightening this thing up in terms of function and use. Window covering is another big decision we have to make. And in the world of window covering, again, we can spend a little, we can spend a lot. I'm trying to find that middle range for this product that looks nice, is durable, will provide to get the job done and checked off, but not something that is just going to have to be replaced in a year. Most of the condominiums that I'm involved in these days, I'm using a 2-inch wide wood slatted leveler type blind window covering. It's very simple, very easy to install, very easily replaceable, but the wood gives it a sense of quality, especially if you've got a fairly cheap vinyl window. These wood slats form a sense of richness to the window. And again, they're no more expensive than a white plastic 2-inch wide leveler slat. It just looks a little bit better. Make some decisions around wood window coverings that look nice, all right? I'd like to spend a couple of minutes talking about the issue of soundproofing. Our 6-unit building here eventually is going to be sold as condominiums. We want to make sure that we've at least looked at soundproofing to improve this building in terms of soundproofing in any way we can. The common party walls between units certainly is something that we want to address soundproofing on. If this unit has flats up and down where somebody's actually living above you and a unit below, well, we're going to definitely need to have to address soundproofing between those two spaces as well. I'm going to give you at least 2 different ways that I've used in soundproofing that are both reasonably effective. Let's talk about units that side by side have an adjoining party wall. Definitely build into your construction plan 2 separate walls between those units. Now, when I mean 2 walls, I literally mean 2 completely separate framed walls between these units with an airspace in between. So picture between these 2 units 2 separate 2x4 walls with an inch of airspace between those walls. And in that 1-inch airspace, I'm putting a Celotex soundboard in between those 2 walls. So basically, I'm framing one wall. I'm putting the Celotex soundboard 2 layers thick on that wall, and then I'm framing another wall right up against it. All right? The Celotex soundboard definitely deadens the transmission of sound. Sound travels through direct wood. So if I just had one wall there, the sound is going to go from one unit to the other right through the stud. But here I'm separating those 2 stud walls, and I'm putting 2 1/2-inch or 5/8-inch thick Celotex sound panels in between those walls. Then on each side of the unit, when I sheetrock those walls, I'm going to put what's called a Z-channel on the face of the stud. A Z-channel is just what it sounds. It's a piece of metal that's formed in the shape of a Z. The whole thing is about 1/4 inch thick, okay? And you simply screw it or nail it to the face of the stud, so that then when you put your sheetrock on that, your sheetrock, it's like installing a little shock absorber behind your sheetrock. That little Z forms a little like a spring almost. And as you screw your sheetrock down, it still has a little bit of flex in there between the sheetrock and the stud. And what that does is it takes the sound that tries to transfer from the sheetrock in through the stud, and it just deadens it right there. It doesn't allow a direct transfer of sound. So if you Z-channel both sides and do 2 walls and put Celotex soundboard in between there, no issues with sound. The same thing exactly if you're trying to insulate from a lower unit to the unit up above, is that you would take the Z-channel and you would put it on the lower side of the ceiling, on the lower floor unit ceiling, and then when you attach the sheetrock to it, it provides that little shock absorber. These are some sound transmission measures that can be helped. If ever you build a building that has a frontage on a busy street, you're also going to want to, on that busy street, put some Celotex soundboard prior to sheetrocking that unit, because it'll help deaden the sound of a busy street. The same with your window. You may want to upsize the airspace in that particular window facing the busy street so that it deadens the sound through a thicker airspace in that window. Okay? So some sound issues we want to look at. Let's talk for a moment about outside living spaces. This is amazing to me how the whole idea of outside spaces have really become a big part of what people look for in a home. I know that every street of dreams that I've walked through in the last several years, one of the biggest features of that home is the outside, sometimes covered, sometimes not covered, living spaces where you can sit outside. I've seen them with gas fireplaces outside, water features outside, beautiful areas for, picnic table and landscaping. So think in terms that when we're designing the exterior, that you create a lot of privacy between the units, and that you spend a few bucks creating outside spaces that really add to the overall square footage that you're offering these people. Certainly in the Oz category, if you're like me, you're going to just spend a lot of money and effort planning your outside living spaces. I have an outside wood-burning fireplace, an entire kitchen outside, gas range, sinks, refrigerator, freezer, the whole 9 yards, and of course, a large courtyard that takes in everything that I want outside. Gas heaters that come out of the ceiling to warm you while you're sitting out there, sound systems, speakers, the whole 9 yards, so that you could just go out there and really enjoy some time. Think on these things, because it's really important that we give people that opportunity. As well, if this unit that you're building doesn't have a garage, you definitely have to plan for some space for storage. People need space to put their camping stuff, their Christmas ornament stuff, all the stuff we collect. My suggestion is that a normal garage, a one-car garage, is 10 by 20. In your floor plan of this space, I would really love to see you build something more like 12 by 30 for that garage space. Now, that extra 10 feet certainly could incorporate the laundry room, mud room, that sort of flow-through room that also provides additional storage. But the ability to organize some working shelves, a little workbench, some things in the garage, that's going to seal the deal. If the gal gets her kitchen and the guy has a garage where he can picture working on some things, guess what? It's done. Really think in terms of how to create those spaces in your initial design work of this property. I'm going to attack a few topics that really have no logical order to them. Things that I want you to hear about in the whole scheme of building this sixplex that I think are important things to consider. They're in no certain order. Random thoughts. I'm going to bounce around a little, but see if you can stay with me. These are important. These are the pearls of a lot of projects, things I've learned along the way. One, I've learned that tenants or buyers, either one, they like some kind of covered front entry area, so that as they come up to the unit, if they park out in the outside parking space, that they can walk up to the unit, get out their keys, and stand in a covered space while they're coming into the unit. It takes a little bit more effort to create a covered space, but if you plan it well, it's not a big deal. You can spend a little bit of money in this space to go a long ways from a market perspective. Let me give you a couple examples. I want you to picture just a little gable entry, covered entry roof, a little gable cover, but where the outside edge of the gable is an opened beam where you actually see the framing structure of that gable framing. And that the underside, when you walk into the entry area and look up, you see actually the beam structure, and you take a little bit of time to sand and varnish those beams. Creates almost like a little lodge look as you enter this thing. Maybe a couple nicely wrapped posts coming down. Could even be log posts coming down. Something that you're spending a little effort on an entry, but the primacy effect, not only that, but the practical application of putting something a little undercover. I've done other entry porches that are less lodge-looking, but that the entry gable there has a slightly radiused ceiling just a nice gentle radius in the ceiling, and then you take some pine tongue and groove, 1x4 pine tongue and groove, and you barrel roll the ceiling of that entry radius and put some nice varnish on it, and people go, oh my gosh, look at this beautiful ceiling in my little entry porch. Very cheap to do, big bang for the buck. Okay? So that's one little important piece of the equation. I want to talk a bit about the garage, not garage decision. Most new construction in most cities, you're going to have to provide a certain amount of parking per dwelling unit. And given the higher density areas, sometimes the parking requirements go down, sometimes they don't. But if it's possible to create a garage, at least a one-car garage per unit, I believe that you improve your overall market. Sometimes you're not going to be able to do that and get the maximum number of units on the space, on the lot. And so you're going to want to park underneath the building. Now, two general ways of parking. One is level entry to the grade of the building, like in a garage and an exterior parking lot. The other way is to park underneath the building. When you don't have the amount of real estate to work with to park exteriorly, you're going to have to park under the building. Whenever you park under the building, you're going to have to add to the overall cost equation of that building. More excavation costs, more engineering costs, more structural steel to basically you're supporting an entire building on an outside perimeter foundation wall with pillared concrete posts throughout. Then you're going to be parking in that garage. You still need to provide some storage space per unit. If the cars are parked in the covered garage, okay, fine. You've still got to provide some storage. Everybody has their stuff that they've got to store. So maybe that storage unit is going to be right in front of their parking space in the parking garage. Need to provide storage. All right? Big deal. Let's talk about garage slabs. I know this sounds crazy, but cars, when they drive around, they get wet. All right? They do. They drive around in the rain. Sometimes there's even snow on the ground. They pick up snow. I want your garage slab to have slope. If it's a single one-car garage, I want it to have slope from the back of the garage to the front. In a 20-foot span, you should have at least 2 inches of slope, of falling from back to the front. Okay? So that when water drips off your car when you pull it in the garage, it actually runs towards the front of the garage. You don't want it running or puddling towards your building. The same thing in a parking garage. A parking garage is just not a big flat concrete surface. It all needs to slope to a drain that's in that parking garage so that you can hose down the parking garage. It all flows and slopes to a drain in that parking garage. Amazing to me how people just think, let's put in a garage and they pour a flat surface. No. The garage is one of those things that when you pour that slab, very negotiable. It can happen right up front in the construction phase. Sometimes if the weather conditions aren't right, you're going to want to allow the dirt that's in that garage space to dry out well, okay, before you actually grade it out and pour the slab. Make sure that you put a lot of steel and a lot of mesh in that slab, and make sure that you use a fiber mesh concrete product that actually has fiberglass particles inside the concrete to really give it a chance to set up and so that it's real good, strong concrete in that garage slab. It's very common to pour garage slabs and have them sink in one corner or another. And if that happens, just be aware that there are companies out there that it's the entire business of the company to come out to a sinking garage slab and core drill a hole in the area that looks like it's fallen. They drill a 2 or 3 inch hole through the concrete. They stick a hose in it and they fill it up with a concrete mortar mix with a pressure pump that pressure pumps the concrete in there. And what happens, of course, is they pressure pump this concrete mortar type mix in there. It's got a lot of calcium in it, so it sets up really fast. pump it in there, and it goes into a void space under that concrete, whatever is kind of settled, and it actually lifts the entire concrete slab back up to its original level area. And then when they get it to that area, they simply stop pouring, pull the hose out, and cap it, and the concrete mortar mix sets up, and voila, a level slab. I can tell you a funny story in this department, one that is pretty hilarious, actually, that as this concrete company came out to core drill a slab in a garage and pump it, they showed up like they would any number of slabs, and they drilled their hole, and they stuck the hose in, and they start pumping. And gosh, they just go through an entire truckload of mortar mix, and the garage slab hasn't moved at all. And they think to themselves, wow, this is the mother of all voids underneath there. You talk about settling. Holy smokes. So they bring in another truck, and they start pumping another truck full in this. I mean, this is a lot of mortar in there, right? And it just isn't doing anything. And all of a sudden, somebody notices that mortar is coming out the vent pipes on the roof and running down the roofing and in the valleys of the roofing like a lava flow. And they, oh my gosh, and they stopped pumping. And of course, what had happened is that when they core drilled through the concrete, they drilled right through a sewer line that was right underneath the garage concrete slab. And they were pumping mortar into the sewer pipe, which was backing up the sewer line into the house, coming out the sinks and the bathtubs and the shower, and then finding its way, crawling all the way up the vents and coming out on the roof. And of course, because this has calcium in it, it's setting up immediately. Well, that's what you have insurance for, I guess. The rule here, though, is don't run your sewer pipe right barely under your garage slab. Your sewer pipe needs to be well underground and well away from everything else so that these kinds of stupid accidents don't happen. Another thing that I've learned along the way is the main water shutoff for the building. Let's give a lot of thought where this main water shutoff of the building is going. It absolutely amazes me how many buildings the main water shutoff is completely inaccessible, where you've got to go into a crawl space, crawl 50 feet across some plastic under a building to turn the water for the building off. Now, of course, we've got the meter at the street, but even that, we've got to run off to the street. Why not have the main water shutoff in a very conveniently located, separate place within your building where you can immediately go there, unlock a little box, and turn it off quickly? I also want to suggest that that space be in a separate, locked area. Not an area that anybody can walk by and just have fun with the main shutoff, okay? A separately locked area that maybe only you as the owner of the building have a key to, okay? So, main water shutoffs. I can tell you another story in a building that I built. I'm sorry, I just didn't do it right, where the main water shutoff came into a unit. And it was in the closet of Unit 1. Well, that's great. If I ever need to get to that main water shutoff, I've first got to make an appointment with the tenant in Unit 1, or knock on their door in the middle of the night, wake them up, run in, silly. Well, in this case, here comes a 2-inch copper main line into the building, and it went into the closet that was right off the living room. It's like a coat closet in their unit. Okay, Christmas Eve. These people, the tenants in this particular building, they leave to go to their family, and they're actually going to be gone all Christmas Eve, stay overnight with their family, spend Christmas Day, and they won't come back to their unit to do their Christmas at their own unit until Christmas night. So they took off. Well, Christmas Eve, the temperature drops to just record lows this particular year, and the main valve, where the 2-inch copper pipe attaches to the main valve when it comes in, it's split right at that valve. the main copper pipe split. It got cold. It froze. This valve was right up against the garage wall. Well, the garage is, 18 degrees out with very little insulation between the garage and this main line. And it froze that main valve and it split a 2-inch line. Well, this 2-inch line exploded, right? And I mean, it exploded. And it fills up from top to bottom this coat closet and then finally blows the door of the coat closet right off the frame. And water rushes out and starts filling up the unit. And I mean, the whole unit. It's a townhouse-style unit, entry level with an entry door. There's a garage door and then a door coming out of the garage into the hallway of the unit. So all these doors, well, a 2-inch main line, that's a big, big volume of water, runs for 24 hours. And it fills up the unit. And I don't mean kind of fills it up. It just keeps going up and up and up and up. It absolutely is amazing that the sliding glass door that went out the back of the building didn't completely shatter and break. Because by the time they came home, when they got home, they saw water that immediately turned to ice coming out from underneath their garage door. Well, the unit had, of course, leaked underneath the door that goes from the garage to the unit and was slowly filling up the garage, but there was slope in the garage floor, but it was so cold, it was freezing almost as fast as it was flowing. They came to their door on the evening of Christmas Day. They hit the garage door opener. Well, it didn't work because it's frozen solid to the concrete. There was an ice flow that had built up about 7 or 8 inches thick, and it was freezing the door to the concrete. So they couldn't drive in their garage doors, so they got out of their car and they walked to the front door. When they walked to the front door, the water was up to the little wagon wheel. It's at 5 feet deep in water with it trying to leak out the bottom. It's pressing against the door, ready to blow the door out. And, of course, to open the door, they would have had to push the door inside. Well, there was no way they were going to push the door inside with that much weight pushing outwards. And they just went, oh, my gosh, and called me. Well, you can imagine what a mess that was. Their Christmas tree is floating, right? Of course, all the outlets shorted out, right, and flipped the breakers. All their presents are floating up near the ceiling, right, if not sunk down back to the carpet. The whole unit's underwater, the whole main floor. All because I was an idiot and didn't put the main water line in an accessible, insulated place. I see people putting water tanks on the second story of a townhouse, and I think, what in the world are you doing? You're just asking for it. Clothes washers and dryers, washing machines. Washing machines puke. They're just like you and I. They have bad days. And all of a sudden, here's a washing machine on the second floor on a simple little vinyl floor with carpet right outside the room. If you got to put a washing machine on the top floor, you sure as hell better have a room that has essentially a mud pan shower base floor to it with a great big drain built in that room. So when the washing machine pukes, it's no big deal. The water just goes down the drain. Planning of this nature is money well spent, but more oftentimes problems can be solved before they ever happen. Make sense? Okay, couple more things. You need to have a pet policy, and if you don't have a pet policy that says no pets, I want you to think about how you might accommodate certain pets in the construction of your facility. I promise you that people will not walk their dog 7 miles away every time. What they will do is walk it 40 yards away. And so in your overall landscape design, your overall scheme of this building, let's be real. These pets, people are going to put them on a quick leash, take them for a quick walk, which most of the time is going to be in your yard. As long as we know that, why don't we accommodate for that? Why don't we picture a place where we can have a little area for pets that we can accommodate their need to get outside, maybe even a little outdoor kennel space where they can actually take their pet out there and put it behind a fence and let it run for a period of time, then come and get it, kind of like a little pet daycare zone, you know? I find that if you anticipate what's going to happen anyway, it just saves this turmoil down the road, all right? You're going to get the idea, if you haven't already, that building a new building is not a solo sport. That you are going to be in charge because, remember, you're a builder. You're going to be in charge of running this project. But I want to give you a few relationships that are really, really critical. Okay? One, somebody needs to be on site on that project all the time. That job site needs to be fenced. It needs to have somebody there the first thing in the morning to unlock the fence and the last one to leave at the end of the day to lock the fence. Obviously, on-site facilities, sanitation facilities, Johnny cans have to be there by code, but you want them to be there, right? You don't want a bunch of old contractors pissing on every corner of your project, right? Put some on-site Santa cans there. Keep a lock fence job site. The next thing I want you to do is to have job site signs that say private property keep out. You have to give notice to the public that this is not open for you to walk around and check out what's going on here. I would also suggest a sign that lays out the job site rules. That everybody walking onto this site or driving onto this site first has to check in with the superintendent on the site. Second of all, nobody comes on this site without license, bond, and insurance. That this is a drug and alcohol and smoke-free zone, right? These are some basic rules that you're going to lay out in sign form on this job site as notice for everyone that you're not running some little weekend project. This is a serious construction site and you need serious guidelines and rules that are employed, okay? I'd like you to consider having some on-site surveillance equipment. If you don't have on-site surveillance equipment, put up signs that say you do anyway. Because if you can keep somebody guessing between 3 job sites of what to rip off, and yours says that you have on-site surveillance equipment, guess what? Jeff Surridge and I, we have learned that that works whether you have cameras or not. Truly does. It provides a deterrent. People looking at that sign are going to think twice that, well, gosh, you can put cameras in a fingernail these days. They don't know where the cameras are. They are really not going to take a risk on your site when the one down the street has no such signage. Let's talk about job site. I want you to have a dumpster, a great big 40-yard dumpster on site at all times. A clean job site is a safe job site. That job site needs to be kept clean, impeccably clean at all times. Subcontractors need to understand that as part of their bid to you, that they clean up all their materials at the end of each day, that they haul away all their own garbage, that the job site dumpster is there just for overall general maintenance, that you still have expectations of them to clean up their own mess, but you are going to have it there so that you can do your part and when you're on site to make sure that that site is always tidy. Okay?